Good morning and welcome to 755 Live, about 5 minutes of what Jesus said. Jesus commanded us to go make disciples, teaching them all of the things that he commanded. And so you can find a different command of Jesus every weekday at our Bible plan at bible.today.church. And then we broadcast these 4 days a week just to help us understand what Jesus said. So about 5 minutes of a command or teaching of Jesus. We like to take the command and make a soundbite out of it. So today's soundbite version of what Jesus said is fast like it's no big deal. Fast like it's no big deal. This comes from Matthew 6, which is a long teaching that Jesus gave, and then he focuses on prayer for a significant part of that. And we're going to pick up in Matthew 6, verses 16 through 18, where Jesus said, "And when you fast, don't make it look obvious as the hypocrites do, for they try to look miserable and disheveled, so people will admire them for fasting. I tell you the truth, that is the only reward they will ever get. But when you fast, comb your hair and wash your face, then no one will notice that you're fasting except your Father, who knows what you do in private. And your Father, who sees everything, will reward you." Jesus has been giving examples of what the kingdom is really like. He has talked about and is going to talk about prayer. But the important thing to notice here, when Jesus said fast like it's no big deal, don't make a big deal out of it. Don't do it for show, but do it to receive the reward from God. He didn't say if you fast. He said when you fast. Now, Jesus didn't follow all of the traditions of the time period. In fact, he got criticized in Matthew 9 by some disciples of John the Baptist, because they said, "Why, Jesus, aren't your disciples fasting like we do, like the other religious people do, like the Pharisees do?" And Jesus replied in Matthew 9:15, he said, "Do wedding guests mourn while celebrating with the groom? Of course not. But someday the groom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast." And so the disciples that followed Jesus, they didn't fast as regularly as those in society at the time. But Jesus said that there would come a time when his disciples would fast. Now, in this time period, fasting was just a standard part of culture. Both the Pharisees and the Sadducees and Judaism as a whole had a lot of tradition about fasting. They dedicated at least 2 days a week to fasting. And then fasting is a part of God's calendar in the Older Testament, and they followed all of those things. And so fasting was just a standard part of culture. But what happened? Well, in the earliest writings that we have from the church outside of the Bible over the first few centuries, a lot of the writings of the early church fathers also assumed that fasting was just normal. One of the earliest documents that we have is called the Didache. It talks about how that Christians should fast 2 days a week, but different than the way that the Pharisees fasted. And so they assumed that believers would be fasting because it was just a part of who we are. Today, we can pretty much assume that we won't be fasting regularly because we don't make that a part of our culture. But if we look at the example that Jesus gave us, he fasted 40 days before beginning his ministry. The Son of God, who lived righteously, began his ministry by fasting. We see Paul, right after he was converted, fasting for 3 days. We see fasting throughout Acts. Every time that there was a big decision to make, when they launched new churches, there's just fasting mentioned throughout the book of Acts. And so when Jesus says fast like it's no big deal, he is saying that we should fast, because he didn't say if you fast, he said when you fast. So when do we fast? When is it on the calendar? Not to put on a big show, not to earn or deserve anything, but in obedience. Fasting is so important. So I want to challenge you today. If fasting isn't a regular part of your spiritual walk, when can you fast? When should you fast? Pray about that. And don't start out trying to do a 40-day fast. Start small. Maybe fasting a meal. Maybe fasting for a certain time period. But putting that on your calendar, making it a regular thing. Because fasting is part of the obedience of self-denial of following Jesus. Jesus didn't say if you fast. He said when you fast. And he said fast like it's no big deal. How can we put that into action today?